On the Y drive, there's a 2540 folder, and there's this thing that says StickAnimation Startup Not Rigged. You can copy that Maya file. We'll paste it in a second.
Where's the Y drive?
On the My Computer or computer, you have to go to the Start menu.
Did you say Y or I?
Y. Go to the Start menu on the bottom, and then go to Computer. And then go to the Y drive, and then go to 2540, and then just right click and copy the StickAnimation. Okay, so once we have that StickAnimation copied, we're going to go into Maya, and we're going to make a brand new project folder that will house that file that we just copied. So we go to File and Project window, and we're going to make a new project. So last time we used the Playing Around folder. So we go to File, Project window, and we make a new folder called your last name underscore StickAnimation. And make sure it goes into your 2540 work folder, and then you can hit accept. Okay, so just so you can see that again, File, Project window, new, give it a name, Sarcona underscore StickAnimation, put it in your work folder, hit accept. All right, so then we're going to go through and open up that. You're holding the space bar. It was flickering. Then we're going to go and open up that file. So if we go to Open Now, there's nothing in there. We can just right click in the blank space and paste that file, and then open that. Okay, so we're going to open, paste that file that we just copied from the Y drive, and then get it. I want you to try to animate these little things just spinning or just bending like that. Okay, now this is not rigged at all. Okay, this is the unrigged one. I want you just to see the importance of rigging stuff before I show you what the rigging one looks like. So in order to do that, I've given you something that is not rigged. It's just modeled and looks exactly like the other one, but it's not ready for animation. But I want you to try to animate it. So I want you to go through and remember our hotkeys where we can come over here and just right click and key the selected things. And I want you to animate these things rotating as one big piece. Okay, so take 5 minutes just to play with this and see what kind of animation you can get without having it rigged. I'm not expecting anything. Because we don't have any controls on this, it's difficult. It's hard to grab the stuff and rotate it and set it up correctly. So the one that I'm going to give you is rigged, meaning that I've set it up to make the animation part easier. Because otherwise what we'd have to do is put all of these things in such an order that it makes it easier to animate, because all of these things are just separate. And if I want this to spin as one piece, I have to connect them so that I can rotate them together. Okay, so on the Y drive, I have another file called rigged. So you can copy that one, paste it, and open that one. All right, so if I click on one of these plus signs, I go to my rotate, you can see how I can rotate this item here. I can marquee this one, rotate that one. Now I didn't lock the other features because I want you to see this. I'm sorry, I did lock those features a different way. So you see how we can't rotate this in any other direction than just this way. Okay? Now if I were to click on the individual pieces, sure, I could move this and do all that stuff, but I shouldn't try to do that. I shouldn't try to grab the actual object. As an animator, I only want to grab what is given to me as a controller. Typically anything that's highlighted as like different, that's what your controlling object is. Okay? So these are here meant to be an easy way to animate it. So if I were to grab these in a specific order and I went to my rotate tool, look at how I can rotate this whole thing very easily to make it look like it's wagging or flopping or whatever you want to call it. Okay? There's also this bigger plus sign up here. It's darker black and it has like a little circle in the center. this is basically like the group. This is like everything on that object, so I can grab that and it selects all the stuff that's part of that. Okay? So what we're going to do is we're going to animate this thing swaying from side to side as a group, but then on your own, you're going to make a brand new animation with this of it actually moving to the right, moving to the left, and then swaying as it does it. Okay? So what we want to do is save our file as, so save your scene as. Make sure you give it a name. So we're going to call it my last name underscore stick together 01. Stick together, that's cute. All right, so stick together 01. So what we need to do is we need to animate this. Now, there are 7 trillion ways to animate something. My way is the best way, okay? My way is the best way for this class, especially because I've already streamlined this process. All right, so if you venture outside the streamline, it becomes very, very jittery. I want to animate this stuff in a way that is easy for you to do without having to do a bunch of stuff outside of this box. So for me, I think it's easier if we were to animate one of these items and then to duplicate that animation to all of them. That seems easier than trying to animate each one individually, right? Cool. So what we're going to do is we're going to grab part 01. So that should be this part way up here at the top. Okay, so if you need to zoom in, guess what you do? You zoom in and you grab it. Okay. Now looking at the story behind this thing, there has to be something that tells this guy to actually start swinging. Okay? It can't just start from nothing and start swinging because that doesn't make sense to us, right? There should be something there. Now because we're just learning the stuff, we're going to pretend that there is some sort of force on it that just makes it start swinging. All right, so our first spot here is this. All right. Now before we get into actually animating this, we should get an idea of what this is going to be doing. Yes, ma'am. All right. So what we're going to do is we're going to set some rotational keyframes. So I'm going to set a keyframe in the rotation. So I'm at frame 1 right here, and I want to set rotation keyframes. Now one way for me to set just rotation keyframes is to right click over here and then go to key selected, and that works, okay? But I want to do it quicker. So if I hold down shift and hit the hotkey for rotation tool, it'll set rotation keyframes. So shift E will set keyframes just on rotation, okay? So go to frame 1, hit shift E. Okay, so now we have keys set just on the rotation for that top one. Now we're going to go up. Now from my first frame to my first pose to my second pose, we don't know how long that time interval is. Okay, we won't know yet. We have to play with it. So as a good starting point, I'll just go up 10 frames. So now go up to frame 10. And then I'm going to rotate it, I said to the left, so I'm going to rotate it to the left a little bit. And then I'm going to set another key by hitting Shift E. Okay, so we're at frame 1, set it vertical. Frame 10, scoot it over, set another key. Frame 20, which is the other way, we're going to set it a little bit further the other direction. And then set a key. Okay, so we just rotate it over, Shift E again. Frame 30, rotate it back the other way a little bit further, Shift E again. Frame 40, rotate it a little bit further, set another key. All right, so here's where we have this. We went from 1 to 10, then to 20, then to 30, then to 40. Okay, so now I'm going to go to 50, and I'm going to start winding it down. Okay, so my rotation here, and I always look at this rotation value, is at 43.946. Okay, so when I rotate it back the other way, I need to stay underneath 43. So when I come back here, I can't go higher than 43 because I'm trying to wind it back down. So I'm going to lower it to like 33 and set a key. Then I'm going to go to 60 and set it to a lower value. Then I'm going to go to 70 and set it to a lower value. Then I'm going to go to 80 and set it to a lower value. And each time I'm crossing over that threshold of that center line. And eventually at like, I'm going to say 110, I'm going to be back at 0. All right. So now what we're going to do is we're going to copy this animation and apply it to all the other pieces. Okay? So the way we copy an animation is we go back to frame 1 here. I highlight my rotates. I right click and copy selected. And then I can grab the next piece, right click and paste selected. Grab the next piece, right click and paste selected. I can actually grab more than one piece at a time and right click and paste selected. All right, so now this is animating and it looks pretty neat, but if you remember stuff that we talked about in the 12 principles of animation, it's not very interesting as far as what it's doing. It's just very staticky. So we need to have some way to kind of tell this to have a little bit more story. And so one way that we could do that is, let's say, number 1, all of these don't move at the exact same time. Because it seems really weird that all of these pieces are moving at the exact same time. If this was an actual, let's say it's a wire hanging from a branch or hanging from a pole or whatever, and there's a gust of wind that blows it, what should happen is that bottom moves, and then the middle moves, and then the top moves, and that's how that whole thing happens. In this, what we're seeing is that all of these are rotating the exact same time. There's no momentum, there's no driving force in this, okay? It's kind of like if you remember from one of the animations where they were showing, I think it was a bear standing up, and one of them it was just like the bear just basically just like stands up, and then the other one they delayed it so that the chest of the bear came up after the other part. And so that gave it a little bit more realism as to how it moves. So that's what we're going to do here. So I want you to rewind your stuff again to the beginning. And you're going to grab them starting at the bottom. You're going to grab that one. So I marquee that little plus sign. I hold down Shift. I marquee the next one. Hold down Shift still. Marquee, marquee, and marquee. Okay, so I should have all 5 of those pieces selected. Okay, another way you can be able to select these is actually inside of the outliner. If you look at the names of these, you'll see that they're called Part 1, Part 2, Part 3, 4, and 5. I could just go through and control click each one of these, and that's another way for me to be able to select those specific parts. It all depends on your preference as an animator. Eventually, if you do character animation stuff, there's like 6 trillion pieces to animate, so you wouldn't use the outliner for that. Okay? So once we have that, we're going to open up the dope sheet. So in your shelf, you should have the dope sheet. If you don't, it's under Window Animation Editors, Dope Sheet. Okay? And the dope sheet is going to show us all of our keyframes. So every single one of our keyframes that we have is listed right here in the dope sheet. And you can see right now they're all perfectly lined up, right? That's what the gray lines are right there. That's all of our keyframes. Now it also shows us in the order we selected these from the top down. So I selected the bottom first, and then the next one, and then the next one. So you can see the order is right here. That's kind of important because what I want to do is take each bar and I just want to offset it a little bit. Okay? So I'm going to go to the Move tool, which is W. I'm going to click on Part 4 and Shift click on Part 1 and just middle drag this over like 2 frames. Okay? Then I'm going to Control click 4 off, middle drag 2 frames over, Control click 3 off, Control click 2 off. Okay? So now each one of these is kind of offset a smidge. I'm going to undo mine, and I'm going to animate it in the opposite order. Okay, so now all I've done is I've just pushed it in the opposite order. So it should start at the top and work its way downward. Now how does that feel?
Like the platform's a controller?
Like the platform's a controller? What kind of thing does it look like?
Rope?
Dogtail, a rope, right? Because it's driven from that base, right? So it feels like that top piece of this is actually controlling how this moves. So it's not so much that we understand, just how to set keyframes and where to put them, but we have to understand how all these things kind of work together to help tell that story. We have to understand what kind of item we're animating, where the movement is coming from for all of that to work. Imagine that we had this, and instead of it being like this kind of animation that's kind of wagging, but what if it was something like this where someone grabbed it and pulled it back like that, or maybe even a little bit further in this direction, and a little bit less in that direction. Okay, so let's say someone grabbed this and it was very tense like an antenna, and then they let go of it, right? So that movement now is not coming so much from the base as it may be coming, from the tip as it is coming from the base. Even though they pulled it back with this one, it's now switching that movement to this part, okay? Because now the antenna's flex and tension is up there. So sometimes that'll change too as you're doing your animation. All right. So this is another good way to add variety into this and control how this movement is happening. So what we want to do next is we want to control the rotations. Right now, every one of these rotations is exactly the same, right? Because we just copied and pasted. They're offset, but they're still the same. So we're going to close the dope sheet, and we're going to open up. I'm going to stop my animation. We're going to open up the graph editor. So you can go to the graph editor in your shelf, or you can go to Window, Animation Editor, Graph Editor. Okay. Now it doesn't matter which one you start with, but this is something that you should see that looks very similar. If you hit F on your keyboard, it should frame your graph so it fits nicely inside the box. Okay. So you should see this. You should see that it starts off slow, right? So if you look at my graph numbers, it starts off at 0, then it goes bigger, 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 biggest, and then gradually gets slower again. If it didn't, I could go to the Move tool, grab these, and just middle mouse button drag it to maybe emphasize it a little bit more or bring it down a little bit less. These values now are going to control how tense this item is. So right now it seems pretty loose, like this thing is kind of swaying all over the place, where maybe it wouldn't be swaying all over the place. Maybe it would be just kind of moving back and forth like this a little bit. So depending on what we have, we would choose that. All right, so we're going to go to the first one in our list. Okay, so for me, I've chose part 1 because that's my top one. You would probably choose part 5 because that's your first one. Okay, and what we're going to do is whichever one is driving this force, that's going to have the most energy, the most rotation to it. Okay, so part 1, that's the one, in my case, has the most movement. In your case, it's part 5, so that's going to be the one that has the most movement. So we're not going to touch it. Part 2, we're going to click on it, and I'm going to click on just the rotate X. That's the only one I need to play with. We're going to shrink these a little bit. So I'm just going to grab the keyframe, hold Shift, and just scoot it down a hair. Okay, nothing crazy, just a hair. Okay, each one of these points, I'm just scaling it down just a hair. Now we have a little bit more movement in there. That initial force that's coming from here, let's say it's rotating it so fast, like 5 miles an hour. The next one's going to get less energy. It's not going to get the full 5. It's going to get like 4. And then the next one might get 2. And then the next one might get 1. And then the last one might get like a half of a mile per hour. That's not a measurement of what we're doing, but it's good enough. Okay? So that's why it's looking the way it's looking. You can see how it's coming to rest. And so depending on what kind of material you're dealing with, that's also going to play a role in what we're doing. If we had a snake head, obviously that would move different than a dog tail, which would move different than a hose, which would move different than a piece of string, right? So all of these things go into account as to what we're going to be doing with this. All right, so now your assignment for this is you're going to open up that rigged one again, and you're going to start from scratch. And this is what I want you to create. Okay, so you animate this first, moving from side to side, and then you're going to animate all of these doing basically what we just did. So I'm setting keyframes right here, just bump, 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 right along this. Okay, every 10 frames. And then at 100, I'm just going to set that back to 0 and set a key. All right, so now I've set keyframes every 10 frames, having this thing be at opposite sides. Okay, so now I can look at this and see what it's doing. Wonderful. I'm going to go in the graph editor, and I'm going to tweak this or look at this and make sure it's doing what I want it to do. Just like the other one, I don't want it to just start all of a sudden and go crazy. I want it to just do a little bit more. Maybe it picks up a little bit of speed here, right? So that's what this is doing. It's going a little bit slower, a little bit faster here, a lot faster there, a little bit, and then it's kind of slowing down a little bit, okay? So the shorter the graph is, the slower it's going to go. The bigger the graph is, the more movement's going to happen in it, okay? So if you look at this, it goes pretty slow. It goes a little bit quicker. It goes a lot quicker. It's going very quick between these two, very quick between these two, but then it starts slowing down again, okay? So that's what that's showing us. So now when we hit play, and it slows down. Now I could add, because it's kind of bothering me of how this is stopping here. I'm going to go to 105 and just add another keyframe. Go to 110, add another keyframe. And then in here, I'm just going to scoot this one up a little bit. And then, oops, too much there. Scoot this one a little bit below, just to give it a little bit more time to rest. Okay, so you see how it came to rest a little bit softer now as opposed to a little bit harder before. Then I'm going to go through and grab this and set keyframes on it. Okay, and just like before, I'm going to set one, and then I'll set the other ones when I copy and paste. So I'm going to set a keyframe here, go up to the end of this. Okay, so I'm going to watch, like, it's right about there that it hits. This should be like this. Okay, so it goes like that. Now as it swings over to the other side, like 2 frames after this, it should be that way. Okay, so that when it hits, boom. Do you see how it swung over? And then when I go to this side, I'm going to do the same thing. It's still there. 2 frames after-ish, I'm going to rotate it to that side. Go up to the next one, set a key, 2 frames after, rotate it again. Okay, so this is the kind of animation that we're going to get. Something like that. And then when I copy and paste it, oops, and copy it. When I copy it, and then paste it, woo. Okay, like that, it will look better once we've done all the other stuff to it. Once we've gone into the dope sheet and taken parts 2 through 4 or 5 and offset them a frame. And then gone into the graph editor and adjusted how they're moving. So I'm just going to pull this down, oops, wrong way, pull this one down, one down. That one down. So there's a little bit of offset between each one. Okay, and the same thing here. And I'm looking at this one. This one is my last part. This should have the shortest graph. And then this one should have the next shortest. And then this one should have the next shortest. Okay, so now if we were to look at that, you'll see the kind of animation we get. Okay, where now it actually looks like it's whipping each time it hits. Okay, and if I decide, you know what, that's a little bit too much movement there or not enough time for all this to happen, I can just grab all my parts like this, like that, and then I can start moving stuff around. So I can start grabbing my keyframes and moving them. One, I wish you were on top. Can I put you up there? Nope. And grab these in different order. That. Okay. So here I can just start grabbing these and spreading these apart. Okay, so now I'm just taking the time that it takes to get from one side to the other, and I'm just condensing or spreading it out so it takes longer to get to some of these. Okay, and I can also then take these, which are those little transition pieces, and spread those out too. Maybe those ones are kind of hitting it a little bit too quick. 2 frames may have been just too much. There we go. So now if we look at it, now we have a little bit more movement in there that makes a little bit more sense. Okay, now they're also looking pretty static. It gets here and stops, it gets here and stops. If we look at the graph, you can see that these rotate X's right there are pretty flat. So if I change their tangent, now they're going to be constantly rotating. So we go back to this, not that, this, and you see now it has a little bit more life to it. And again, what I've set up my rotations as is controlling how flimsy this thing is. Okay? So your first step in this is to draw out on your paper what you think each, not frame, but each pose is going to be. Okay? Then you're going to go through and animate the platform going left and right, make sure that that looks good. Then you could animate this first one going back, rotating left and right, and then you can just copy that and then adjust all the stuff that we've done. Okay?